The Bandirvan ashram on the Yamuna River functioned as a rigorous laboratory for the soul. Here, scholars spent decades deconstructing ancient manuscripts, treating the divine as a complex riddle that could only be solved through logic and exhaustive effort. These men followed the path of jnana. It's a massive framework built on precise scripture reading, physical discipline, and intricate rituals, stacking up toward a peak of spiritual mastery. Bhondu lived entirely outside this system. An orphan performing the ashram's manual labor, he was illiterate and often the target of his peers' jokes. While others debated the nature of the absolute, Bhondu was busy sweeping the floors. During a sunset sermon, the head guru told his disciples that God is indifferent to wealth or status. He explained that Lord Jagannath, in his childhood form, was so moved by simple affection that he would enter the homes of cowherds just to steal their fresh butter. The scholars in the room analyzed the guru's words as a sophisticated spiritual metaphor. Bhondu, however, heard a literal story about a child who liked butter. To him, the path to God wasn't a philosophical puzzle, it was a simple matter of providing a meal. We often assume that the more profound a truth is, the more complex its access must be. Bhondu's directness highlights a common human error, the tendency to overthink the divine until it becomes a theory rather than a presence. The next morning, Bhondu secured a small pot of butter from a local woman and carried it deep into the forest. He placed it in a clearing as a literal offering, told God the food was ready, and went to graze his cows. When he returned, the pot was empty. Suspicious of a thief, Bhondu hid behind a banyan tree the following day. After hours of waiting, a child appeared, dressed in yellow silk with a peacock feather in his hair. He had the unmistakable, large, round eyes of the Jagannath idol, and he was eating the butter with his bare hands. A trained scholar would have been paralyzed by the sight. Bhondu simply ran out from his hiding spot and began scolding the child. He chased the boy through the brush, shouting at him for stealing his butter every day. The boy tripped, and as they stood face to face, the tension broke. When Bhondu realized who stood before him, his anger turned to tears of joy. The divine child didn't demand a prayer. He simply smiled and told Bhondu he was still hungry, asking if there was anything else to eat. Lord Jagannath wasn't looking for a perfect ritual or a memorized chant. He responded because Bhondu approached him as a living person, without the layers of performance and pretense that usually define religious worship. This became their daily routine. The creator of the universe and an orphan boy sat together in the dirt, sharing butter and talking about their day as if they were old friends from the same village. At the ashram, the disciples noticed Bhondu's constant smile. When he told them he was spending his afternoons with Lord Jagannath, they openly mocked him, telling the guru that the boy had finally lost his grip on reality. The guru, however, saw a strange sincerity in Bhondu's expression. To settle the matter, he gave the boy a test. If this forest companion was truly God, Bhondu had to bring him back to the ashram for everyone to see. When Bhondu made the request in the forest, the divine child refused. He explained that he preferred the quiet of the woods to the noise of the ashram. Bhondu didn't plead. He simply gathered his butter pots and told the boy that if he wouldn't come, their friendship was over. For the first time, the child appeared genuinely troubled. Cornered by Bhondu's ultimatum, he finally yielded. He agreed to go, but only on the condition that Bhondu carry him the rest of the way on his shoulders. This moment reveals a unique aspect of devotion. A genuine, unforced love creates a connection so strong that it can influence the divine will in ways that rigid adherence to scripture cannot. As the sun began to set, Bhondu arrived at the ashram gates. As he stepped into the courtyard with the child on his back, the entire space was suddenly flooded with a brilliant, warm light that made the shadows of the stone pillars stretch and dance. The laughter of the disciples stopped instantly. Faced with the literal presence of what they had spent their lives debating, the scholars dropped their books and fell to their knees in total silence. The guru stood frozen. He saw that his own lifetime of strict discipline and heavy reading had created a distance that Bhondu's simple meal had closed in a single afternoon. He realized his mastery of the texts was no match for the boy's capacity to love. We build massive stone structures and elaborate systems to reach the divine, often losing sight of the goal in the process. Bhakti, or pure devotion, acts as a shortcut. It reminds us that the complex intellectual scaffolding we build is often unnecessary for a direct connection. When the disciples who had spent years mocking him asked for his forgiveness, Bhondu held no resentment. He told them there was nothing to forgive, proving that his heart was as free of malice as it was of complicated theories. The following day, Bhondu did not return from the forest. When the guru searched the clearing, he found only an empty butter pot and a single peacock feather left behind. The boy had finally left the ashram for good to stay with his friend. This story suggests that the most profound truths aren't locked away for the intellectual or the wealthy. They remain within reach of anyone who approaches life with the same unblemished heart that Bhondu brought to that forest.